The aspiration of gesture is to help people be successful in a world where there are no paths. Where the path is wherever you're going. The path is, we're used to a path where you can look ahead and see where you're going. I think for us, the path is look behind you and see where you came from. And whatever your steps, you see your footsteps, that's the path you took. Ahead of you, there's nothing. Test, everything okay?
Rodeo.
Isn't there there's a warm-up phrases like rubber baby
boogie bumper, rubber baby boogie bumper. Or red
Sally
leather, yellow leather,
Associations.
red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. That's a tough one.
Yeah,
red leather,
I'm not gonna
yellow
do that
leather.
one.
How about this one? Unique New York.
Unique New York.
Unique New York.
Unique New York.
Pop in the applicatives or whatever they need the little thing for.
Oh, probably do that anyway.
Sorry. Okay.
Ready?
We are totally unhireable.
We are totally unhireable.
Unhireable.
Rodeo.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Unhireable. This is your podcast for an honest take on early career. Gesture has spent the last decade working with students and employers, and so we're here to break down the truth about how school doesn't actually prepare you for work the way that you might think it does. My name is Maile Sue.
I'm Kiera Dempsey.
I'm here with Liz Copeland, Matt Erickson, and Kevin Mihada. And recently, we welcomed a bunch of students to campus, freshmen. So there's a lot of excitement and for starting college. But also, I think there was a lot of questions and concerns about major. A lot of them come in without being declared in a major. I came in just like that. I wasn't a direct admit student, so I definitely remember feeling nervous about trying to figure out what major was. So we thought today that could be a good topic to start with, thinking about different misconceptions and worries that students have. So, I guess thinking on our own experience, Kiera, how did you come to pick your majors?
Well, I ended up double majoring in history and psychology, and I've definitely mentioned that in our earlier episodes. And I came to history just because I really liked the classes. I would say that was more of a passion pick at the time than a career mindful pick. And I had honestly just filled out most of the requirements, and then I went to a history advisor and they said, you could just apply to the major right now. So I did. But then after that, I had this feeling that I needed something else to seem more professional. And when I was thinking about what other majors or minors I would do, I started leaning towards psychology, and I have really no logic behind it, but I felt like psychology was more professional, like it would give me an entrance into more generalist jobs. I think that's because when I talked about it with other students, that major seemed like it was grouped in with communications or business, just again, a more generalist major. And I mean, looking back on it, I don't know if I feel like that's true, but it felt like a major that would open up more of that ambiguous career path down the line. Like it would give me more options. And if I was a history major, I'd have to be a history professor or something like that. Do you guys feel like there's really a difference between some of these liberal arts majors and professionalism? Like that could actually lead to a more generalist path?
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, going back to stories we tell all the time, my cousin came to UW. She majored in accounting. She became an accountant at Boeing. She is now an accounting lead supervisor, director, bigwig at Boeing. The entirety of her career has been in accounting. So to me, that just feels like a very straightforward, we call it linear path, right? Major in accounting, became an accountant. So something about that degree set her up for a job. But then, I don't know, it goes a bit more mushy after that.
That's such a common experience for students coming in and thinking, I need to pick the major that feels like it's professional. And I'm super curious about how you came to think that psychology, I know you said it's sort of murky, but why psychology stood out as being like more pre-professional than history. And I definitely, in the arts, that comes up a lot because students come in and they're like, well, if I choose this, am I locked out of certain things or am I going to be at a disadvantage? And I think you could be at a disadvantage with almost any major or an advantage. It's sort of like what you make of it, but that's not a very satisfying answer for students. And it's also like, it sort of passes it off on them. And so I know as an advisor, that felt like very dissatisfying to be like, oh, well, here's some, I would be like, here's some alumni examples you could look at. But that feels still like like we're trying to give them something linear, and it's not necessarily, that might not be the career pathway that works for them. So, yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot. Like students want that easy answer. They want like a clear path. They want some sort of certainty. And with any major commitment that you make, you're not guaranteed any kind of certainty. It's just like you're investing in something. I mean, if you look back, like, was there a difference between what you got out of your psych classes versus what you got out of your history classes in terms of pre-professional skills?
I mean, now looking back, I don't necessarily feel like that's true. I do think maybe some of it was that psych felt more connected to STEM, and there's some feelings around STEM being more professional than history or other majors like history. And I felt like those skills felt more marketable. Like I was telling people I was doing a little bit of research in my classes. I was doing more group projects. And I was doing statistics. It just felt like something that was going to apply to the real world more than history. But even when I was trying to sell those skills to other people and myself, I didn't really feel like I had them. I mean, I as a student was like, I'm saying these things, but if someone really put me in a room and said, do real world statistics for me or real world research, I would totally need some help in doing that. I wasn't actually prepared to do any of that. But something about those skills felt more professional in the moment.
Kiera and I did not overlap. I was in the history department for a while too. And we would have faculty say, well, they're history majors. They're such good writers. And I said, oh, do you just give out 4.0s to every single history major? I'm like, no, no. So they're not all perfect writers, are they? And then there's this realization that they did write a lot, and some of them were good, and some of them were okay, and some of them were not as great. But to just throw out this qualifier that if you major in this, you will have this, in the liberal arts, that's a tough sell because, well, it's double-sided. Either it's not true, or if it is true, then what differentiates them? Neither of those are actually that helpful in terms of situating a major and its relationship to career outcomes.
Yeah, well, and then if someone is good at writing, are they stuck thinking like, well, what jobs are specifically do you need to have good writing for? Like,
Right.
Does it narrow it down for you if that is the thing that feels true to you?
Totally.
Well, and like we've talked about with school mindset, what you're really good at writing is school papers. And so if there's a job that requires you to write school papers, you could be pretty good at it. Unfortunately, you're already in that job, which is a student. And it's a job you have to pay for rather than get paid for. So that's not a long-term job you want. But I think the question that you asked about what our perception, how we get our perceptions of professional is a really interesting one. And I wonder if part of it is sort of extrapolating the name of the major. So if you're a history major, can you become a historian? And it's hard for people to imagine that, which is because there aren't that many historian jobs, and you don't get any of them from being a history undergraduate anyway. Psychologist, you actually also need a graduate degree, but there are more psychologists doing regular work in the world. We can imagine that. And to Matt's point, I think we do have these sort of two buckets of undergraduate degrees that can lead pretty directly into a particular career, like accounting. And if it's the sort of emerging little name theory here, like I could be an accountant. Yes, that is literally what you could be when an engineer, same thing. And that would hold for any professional degree. And then, the liberal arts bucket, which are things that do not lead, whatever they teach you, they do not lead directly to any particular career, which we tend to market as opportunity. You can do anything. Although technically you could also do anything with no degree, but that, still go to college. And so it's a different sales pitch, but also a different experience that we, need to build for them. But I think that understanding, I think you're right, is very much tied into the need or desire or hope for a path, right? Like, and in accounting or in a professional career, the path is clearer. It is, like you said, at a more linear path. I can see where I am, I can see where I want to go, and here's how I get there, by doing an accounting degree. And we do give, I feel like part of the anxiety around this is we certainly give the impression at universities, and this is coming from society as a whole, that there are certain jobs you need a college degree for. That's true. That's empirically true. Or that you almost certainly do. Not always, but need a college degree to get. So you're in high school. Next step, go to college. Next step, get the job. And so, of course, that implies a much more linear path than actually exists. But as we talked about, I'm not sure if when we hear stories of successful people, they are very rarely linear paths, even for people who end up in highly professionalized fields. The linear path really goes to the first job or two. And then beyond that, it could very well be, if you're an engineer and you become a manager, that is not part of the engineering undergraduate curriculum. So that's a path that led to your first job, and then you had to learn how to manage people, how to work within an organization. And so then the path becomes less linear after that. I think the more we've talked about it, I'm not sure that metaphor of linear and nonlinear is really the right metaphor, because it implies that even the nonlinear path, it's like there is a right path. Maybe it's linear, maybe it's not. I just have to find the right path. Someone show me what the path is, and I can get there. And that distracts us from the real task, which is not actually a navigation task. It's not how do I get to where I'm going. It's where the hell am I going? And so I think the whole path idea actually implies that I know where I want to get to go. I just need to know how to get there. But I think our problem in college more generally, the problem of this stage of life, of like discovering who you are, this is not like a problem in a dysfunctional way, but what this stage of life represents, early career represents, is really figuring out where you're going, not knowing where you're going and figuring out how to get there. And so that's a sense in which path isn't really the right, it makes it sound like it's just a navigation problem. Just show me how to get there.
Like,
but if you
pick one,
follow
it.
Pick a path.
Yeah.
Here's the way to go. Follow this, follow the yellow brick road, follow this trail, whatever it is. But if you don't know where you want to go, then no one can give you a path, right? And so I think when I think about the conversations we've had with students over the years, and how do I get to X career? They're not necessarily sure that they want to be in X career. They just want to have like a path. And the problem is, if you follow that path for many years and that turns out not to be the career you wanted, then you are going to be back on the nonlinear path. And so I think the question is, how can we build a place where people can really focus on figuring out where they want to go? And then the how to get there will sort itself out.
As a side note, this is crazy. And this is an advent much more recent than when I was in school. There are students who apply to and get into medical school. This is true. Start medical school, realize what it is actually going to be a doctor, and then say, oh, I don't want to do this. And you're sitting there. First of all, medical education is very expensive. And so having that go to someone who's not going to be a doctor is a bad thing for society. But I think, to your point, that's such an easy path. I'm going to be a doctor. What kind of job do you need a degree for? Oh, doctor. That's top of the list for tons of people. Do it. Check the boxes. Land in med school, which is hard to get into. And then, oh, this is not where I'm supposed to be. That would just be debilitating, And the fact that I think that is an embodiment of student mindset, right? That's checking a ton of boxes, saying, this is going to lead to something else. It's super straightforward. I don't ever have to start thinking about ambiguity and discomfort because I'm going to be a doctor. It makes sense. That was shocking to me when I first heard that from someone at a medical school.
Oh, I know several people that's happened to.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, you think about like all the aspects of going in, even just visiting the doctor's office. Like, those are things that you're going to be engaging with, but to have it be a surprise. I also think I think knowing people that have had that happen with any discipline, like I know people that have come back to school wanting to do art because they didn't do the thing that they wanted as an undergrad. I think it feels like they get trapped in a narrative that they've locked themselves into like very early on around like, this is what I have to do, because it is that, yeah, it's like that path of identified that is safe, that feels good to tell people about. And then you're blind, you block out all the other things that you could see along the way. And I don't know, just like you were saying, Kevin, I think all the people that I know that have had the most interesting careers, they've had the most breadth in where they've gone and how they've traveled and things that they've learned and brought together. But that feels really scary to do as a student, to be like, I fully don't know, but I'm just here to absorb and learn and see how things go, you know?
Yeah, totally. Even from my experience, coming in, trying to be in computer science and then didn't get direct admit, but like that kind of idea that I was like, okay, I can do computer science, I can be a computer scientist, like that's going to be my career. That started in high school. So even before, it's like I came in just like because it was comfortable to know that like I'm coming in, this is my plan for 4 years, gonna, pay tuition, make progress towards this. So it doesn't feel like I'm wasting time. But that was like the rest of my identity for like half of college at least until I got to gesture, because like that was just cemented in my brain as who I was gonna be and what I was gonna do. And then that was hard to break out of. But yeah, for me that started in high school.
And then you found linguistics, and like when did that feel comfortable, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I found linguistics, I think maybe freshman, or it was early too, but I was still trying to be a computer scientist. So I was always like, well, I can't really do linguistics. But then it was like to the point where I could not do computer science. I was getting rejected from it. I was becoming a junior, so I have to declare something. So at that point I was like, well, I do like linguistics. It is, I think, an open major, or, do prerequisites and then you're fine. It was not highly competitive. I knew I could get into it and I liked it. So eventually then I was like, okay, I can do this. But so it was a little bit of like being forced to let go of the other pathway and then accepting that. Because honestly, if I had gone into computer science, I probably would have still kept with that path, just because I thought that was career, that was job for me after college. But I don't know. I find it curious to think about if I would have liked it or not, because I know some people who do computer science jobs and things. And again, I didn't mind it. I think I could have been fine at it, but I just would have had a very different life than I do now. And maybe I would have liked it. Maybe I wouldn't have, but I don't know.
The idea of like wrong versus right path.
Because starting in high school and then coming into college, like that was the right path. That was going to be a stable career. I was not going to have to worry. I didn't have to worry through college really, besides getting in and not getting in. But that felt right. So when I couldn't do it, then I was like, oh, then I have no path, or, I missed my right path.
I definitely panicked around things like that too, and especially with history. I was thinking about becoming a history professor and going to graduate school and what are the things I could do with that. And even though I thought psychology might be more generalist, I also still thought about those things, because you Google what can you do with a psychology major, and everything that comes up is psychology, psychologist, go to grad school. Again, it's like history too. And so then I started thinking, oh, I might have to do something direct with this too. And the whole time it didn't really feel right. I didn't really feel like any of those career paths were what I should be going down. And I didn't really feel good about it until I found Gesture 2, but especially the externship program, which we've talked about before. That's where I had a mentor from Amazon. Well, I had 2 of them. And they both had paths that weren't linear, that they had these liberal arts degrees and ended up working in a job at Amazon that had nothing to do with what they'd studied. And before that, they'd had jobs that were even different from the jobs they were in now. And that's when I started to feel a little bit more reassured that, oh, I don't have to force myself into this linear pathway, even though we might not be using that metaphor anymore. But
well, that expectation that there is going to be a path, right? I think that's also where you see all these surveys of people after they graduate from college. Did college prepare you for the job you're in now? Or did your major prepare you for the job you're in now? You get really high numbers of people in the liberal arts saying no. Well, I would actually think about reorganizing that question to a space of, is the job you have now one that requires a bachelor's degree? If so, then college did prepare you for that. But you can't just sit there and say this degree equals this job.
Yeah.
I think that's where we start really honing in on the gesture space. Like, what is gesture doing What should a student anywhere be doing beyond just taking classes and passing and getting grades and things like that? That opens up the door for what happens during that period, which is how you navigate a space with no path, how you find your way with no route. It's hard. It's really hard. I understand, like, the stress is so real. My gosh.
Yeah, nothing, I mean, to your point, to connect back to school mindset, school is a path, right? That's one thing it does well. Might be the only thing. No, that's one of the things it does well. And it's very clear. You progress each year to another grade. There's a curriculum and goes so and so. Everyone in your age is doing it. Everyone who in your age in our country has always done it that way. Well, not always, but you know what I mean. And so you're making progress. You can see, you can track that, and you know what's ahead of you. You know what the next step is. And so it's very disorienting to not have that, when you come into college. And what we don't do well enough, and do often enough, to your point, is to, come to grips with the fact that there isn't really a path after that. Like, that's where the path ends. And it's supposed to end that way. That's what happens in sort of adulthood when you go into, I mean, we could have a system where everyone had a path where in 8th grade your job was defined for you and then you just kept going. And that would provide security of your path at the cost of imprisoning you in something that you don't like for the rest of your life. So we should be pretty glad that we are open in that way. But I think you're right. The question, and I think I even said, can we make a space for people to discover your path? That's even too simplistic. I think the aspiration of gesture is to help people be successful in a world where there are no paths, where the path is wherever you're going. The path is, we're used to a path where you can look ahead and see where you're going. I think for us, the path is look behind you and see where you came from. And whatever your steps, you see your footsteps, that's the path you took. Ahead of you, there's nothing. And then, can you deal with whatever choice you make, whatever happens to you? Can you adapt? Can you change direction? Can you make a positive, growth and change moment out of whatever happens? And so there's no wrong path in the sense that, that you can know it at the time you make the decision. Well, I guess you could make a dumb decision knowingly, but you're going to run into dead ends. That's not a failure. That is the nature of moving in a space in which there's no clear path. There will be dead ends. You'll have to change direction. How do you grow from that and keep going? And then, we've talked before, I think the story of a linear path is either one that we've falsely created afterward, because it looks more linear if you look back on it than it actually was. But it's also boring. And, nobody wants that. So, the interesting stories we hear when you dig in, and everyone has these, are the things that happened to you, the meaningful moments in life that changed you in a way that could redirect you in some way. And I think in that sense, even regret over path is not necessarily a terrible thing, I hope, because I kind of have regrets. That just indicates that you've learned something about yourself that you didn't know then. And since we don't have a time machine, just be glad you learned it at all, and continue on.
With that in mind, how do students make that decision then around picking a major? Because I think it still feels like there's weight to it, even with that framework in mind. Like, how do you make that right choice? Is it, where do you start narrowing down that list?
For me, and so first of all, you have to become comfortable with not having a path. And I'm sure we'll unpack this in the many ways that this is true, but just right now focusing on sort of like your own kind of anxiety and discomfort and stress about, like, I don't know where I'm going, right? Like that. The answer is not to say, like, okay, here's where you're going, or for us to tell that. I think getting to a point where you're like, well, here's where I'm going to go next. And then whatever I learn from there, I'm going to go to the next place. And I think that applies to major in some ways as well, because the major, you're only going to be in a major for a couple of years. And you can't really screw it up that badly. And so it's not as high stakes a decision as it seems like it is, but it's not a no stakes decision. So I think within gesture, to me, the answer is find a place that you know will challenge you. How do you want to grow? Go wherever people are going to challenge you to grow in that way. That's because that will actually generate the stories that matter in employment as well.
I think it's funny how often students come here not expecting to be challenged.
Yes.
That even just in this first few weeks of this program, welcoming students to campus, they're like, should I really be here to learn, or should I just be trying to like pass my classes? Like, that's a legitimate question the students have asked. I think that's really fascinating because it just feels like such a big hurdle to get into college and to get here, and then to put yourself in a space where you seek out challenge is not. It's weird how it's really an unnatural thing.
It's totally unnatural. It's totally unnatural. I mean, we talk about failure and challenge a lot in Gesture, and honestly, that is used in a cliched way in higher ed. People talk about it, but there is no failure. And I mean, there is failure, but there is no system of accommodating that in a way that facilitates growth. So if you take a risk in a class and you fail a class, that's bad. Or even get a bad grade, that seems bad. If you don't take the prerequisite you need, that seems bad. You miss your opportunity to major. There's lots of, there really aren't opportunities for risk in the academic space in the way that faculty actually think there are. And there are, like they would be willing to accommodate that, but that doesn't, as long as we have grades that, and they matter, then it's more risky than it should be in the academic space. But you're right. I think that there's a risk academically. There's a risk in terms of identity. There may be a risk of like actually getting into a major or or getting into graduate school if that's where you're going. So there are consequences that make it difficult for students to take risks in the way that we encourage them. That language, if we just said take more risks and try to grow and we didn't have a structure for that, that would honestly just be lazy on our part.
Yes.
So to your point, and to the point you made, Matt, like I think our goal in Gesture, build a place that is separate from the academic space, that is designed explicitly for professional growth and personal growth, so and building new mindsets. That's the place you go to fail, through programs and through working in Gesture, or listening to podcasts about that stuff.
Yeah, one thing I was going to add, particularly if there's any really early like freshmen kind of listening, but like there's a lot that goes into like the transition into college or just kind of just this new life as a young adult living more independently. So sometimes it can be hard to like imagine trying to challenge yourself in this way, either academically or through Gesture. And like even if I hadn't come in trying to do CS or been very focused like that, it would have been really difficult to imagine myself trying to take on some of this really early on. So I think it's something that you'll find the right time when you're ready to do it. And so it's not like something you feel like you have to do right away, especially if you have other things going on, because again, college is just such a whirlwind of experiences that can be a lot to take on at once. So I think that's one thing with Gesture is that like we're here when you're ready to take it on. It's definitely, I think, self-initiated. You'll get the most out of it if you come to work with us when you're feeling ready and motivated and comfortable to take on a lot of this ambiguity. You'll get a lot out of it, but it's okay if it's not your first quarter here or yeah.
I think that I'm really glad you brought up that point. And this was in your question as well, is that when we talk about challenge, we do, this is actually very American, think of it in a very like challenge yourself way. And you have to be open to that. So I think there's two elements of challenge and growth. One is, are you willing to do that? And then the second is, can you do it yourself or do you need help? And hard challenges, I think, are extremely hard to do yourself. And when we think about the great accomplishments that people have had in any area, in sports or ideas, usually people are helping them, challenging them. So I think to your question, thinking about the major as a place to challenge yourself is a goal. But even better, or alongside that, think of the major, and not just the major and everything else, because this is how you should think about Gesture. Go to a place where other people will challenge you. That, I think, is the secret to challenge at this pace. Do not attempt to do it all yourself. Plenty of things, if we could challenge ourselves, we would all be fit, eating the right food, all the time, doing all of we would never waste any time. We'd never procrastinate. We'd sleep late. Everything would be perfect. Clearly, none of that works. And actually, even when you pay other people to challenge you, that often doesn't work. But when it does work, that is a community of people who will support and push you. I think challenge is extremely rare for someone to be able to individually take it on themselves and push themselves. And probably they're an expert at some level on that. So what happens in the beginning, find people who will do that. Coincidentally, we are such people. You should find us. You did find us if you're watching this. So that is I think that is our goal. I'm glad you brought up that point, but to emphasize that Gesture is not just a place where people who are challenging themselves go. It can be like, I know I need to be challenged. I can't do it myself. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do. Somebody needs to challenge me. And when you do, I'll rise to the occasion, but I can't really do it myself. Then that's all that you need to do to be a part of Gesture.
Okay, so it sounds like today we've covered quite a bit diving into major. It's still a very complicated topic. I feel like maybe you're not fully convinced about, not having to worry about major. So I think, we'll have some upcoming episodes to continue this discussion about major that you should look out for. So check back in to hear more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Want to hear more from Gesture? Check out the rest of the UNHIREABLE podcast on YouTube and Spotify. For even more content, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at gesture_UW.